Do you want to learn how to play blues piano, but you don't know what to practice for your level? Well, in today's lesson, I'm going to show you the 5 levels of blues piano, starting from the beginner level and working all the way up to the pro level. At each level, I'll demonstrate a solo, show you the best chords to use, the best left hand accompaniment, and the best right hand soloing technique. All right, here's the level 1 solo demonstration. So at this level, it's very important to focus on only 3 basic chords: C major, then F major, and G major. We call this the 1, the 4, and the 5 chords in the key of C major. Now for the left hand accompaniment, I recommend that you play what's called a 4 on the floor. This is basically where you take the root and the 5th of each chord and the root and 6th of each chord and you switch between the 2. Okay, so you're going to do this on your C chord, then you're going to do it on your F chord, and then on your G chord. Finally, the best scale to use for level 1 is your minor blues scale. This scale has only 6 notes: C, E flat, F, F sharp, G, and B flat. It's a 6-note scale, and the amazing thing with this scale is that all 6 of these notes sound great over all of your chords in the blues. All right, before I teach you level 2, if you're enjoying the lesson, please hit the like button, and if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. All right, this is level 2, late beginner, and here's an example for how you might improvise the blues. At level 2, instead of playing ordinary chords like C major, it's important to play 7th chords to get that authentic blues sound. So instead of C major, you're going to play C7. And instead of F major, you're going to play F7. And instead of G major, you're going to play G7. For the left hand accompaniment, I recommend that you play the blues shuffle. This is a lot like the beginner left hand that I taught you in level 1, except now we're going to play 8th notes. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. So now we're going to grab each of these notes twice. 1, and then 2, and, 3, and, 4, and. And then when we change chords, like to F, we're going to do the same thing here. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. And then same on the G chord. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. Now at level 2, the scale that I recommend that you use to improvise is what's called the Mixo Blues scale. It's a 9-note scale and it sounds really good over all of your chords. So the scale uses these notes: C, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, A, and B flat. Now there are a couple tricks to remembering the notes of the scale. First, you can think of it as your C minor blues scale, except we're adding 3 notes: the D, the E, and the A. Alternately, you could think of it as the Mixolydian scale, which is basically like a C major scale, except we're going to use a B flat instead of the B. This is called the C Mixolydian scale, except we're going to add two additional notes, the E flat and the G flat. And this is actually why we call it the Mixo Blues scale, is because it's a combination of the Mixolydian scale and the blues scale. By the way, if you want to do a deep dive on blues soloing and you're a beginner to early intermediate level pianist, we put together the full learning track for your level. This is the blues learning track. And in this learning track, you will learn everything that you need to know about playing the blues and improvising over the blues. One of our most popular courses is the 10 Lesson Blues Challenge. You'll also learn blues endings. You'll learn the Bible of blues riffs. This is 60 of my favorite blues riffs for the piano, how to improvise in different keys. You'll learn different types of blues like slow blues, medium blues, and fast tempo blues. You'll learn blues lead sheets. You'll learn how to play minor blues, the 4 on the floor technique, which is one of my favorite techniques, some popular blues tunes like Cruella de Vil, the Broadway kick line technique, Amazing Grace, and a ton of other great blues content. So I'll put a link to that learning track below. All right, level 3 is early intermediate, and here's an example for how you might improvise at this level. At level 3, your blues playing can start to incorporate a little bit more of a jazzy sound. And this starts with your left-hand chords. Instead of playing ordinary 7th chords that I taught you at level 2, you're going to play what are called 3-note rootless voicings. And a 3-note rootless voicing is when you take a chord like a C7 and you remove the root and the 5th from the chord, and you add one additional note. In this case, we're going to add the D, which we call the 9th. And we call this the 9th because it's 9 notes above the root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So instead of C7, you're going to play a C9. And notice there's no root in this chord. Therefore, we call it a rootless voicing. Now on the F7 chord, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to remove the root and the 5th. We're going to leave these 2 notes in, but we're going to put the E flat on the bottom, and then we're going to add a really cool note on the top, the D, which we call the 13. And the reason we call it a 13 is because it's actually 13 notes above the root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So instead of F7, we play a much jazzier sounding F13. And same thing for the G7 chord. Instead of playing the ordinary 7th chord, we remove the root and the 5th. We're going to put the 7th down here on the bottom, and we're going to add an E, which is also the 13th of a G chord. So instead of G7, we play a G13. Now for your left hand accompaniment, I recommend that you play what's called the Charleston stride. And the Charleston stride is when you jump from the root up to the chord. And this is a stride left hand, when you jump from root to chord, but you're going to play the Charleston rhythm. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And you're going to do this on all of your chords. So same with the F chord. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then same on the G chord. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now when you get to level 3, the scale that I recommend that you use to improvise is what's called the dominant bebop scale. This is an 8-note scale that will give your blues solo a little bit more of a jazzy sound. So when you're improvising over your C7 chord, you can use this C dominant bebop scale. It's a lot like your C Mixolydian scale, except you're adding one extra note, the B natural. And when you're improvising over your F7 chord, you can use your F dominant bebop scale, which uses these 8 notes. Once again, it's like the F Mixolydian scale, except you're adding an E natural. Finally, on your G7 chord, you can use your G dominant diminished scale, which uses these 8 notes. All right, at level 4, here's an example for how you might improvise. At level 4, I recommend that you add passing chords, shells, and instead of playing 3-note rootless voicings, I recommend that you play 4-note rootless voicings. Starting with passing chords. At level 4, blues pianists will start to add some chords in between their other chords. For example, if you look at measure 5 of your 12-bar blues, you have an F chord. Well, at level 4, blues pianists will oftentimes add a G minor 7 and a C7 in front of this F chord. This is called a 2-5-1 chord progression, and it's one example of the types of passing chords that you can add to your blues. Now for the chords themselves, I recommend that you use 4-note rootless voicings. And the way to do this is to take the chords that I taught you earlier, your 3-note rootless voicings, and you're going to add 1 note. This is the 13th of the chord, and this makes it a C13 chord. And you can do this on your other chords, like F. Instead of playing the 3-note rootless voicing, you're going to add a G, and it gives it a little jazzier of a sound. Now, when you're playing rootless voicings, you're typically going to jump from the root up to the chord, but this presents a problem. When you do this technique, this takes up 4 beats to jump from the root to the chord. But what do you play if a chord only takes 2 beats? If the chord only takes up 2 beats, then I recommend that you change techniques to your shell chords. And shell chords are basically when you just play 2 notes from the chord. So if you go to your G minor 7 and it only takes 2 beats, then you're going to play a 2-note chord shell. And then your C7 only lasts for 2 beats. You're going to play a 2-note chord shell, and then you're going to go back to your rootless voicing on your F chord. Now at level 4, the scale that I recommend that you focus on in your solo is what's called the dominant diminished scale. And basically, anytime you're on a chord like a C7 chord, you can play this amazing scale and you get some really cool, colorful notes. The notes of the C dominant diminished scale are C, D flat, E flat, E, F sharp, G, A, and B flat. And the easy way to remember this scale is you start on this note and you go half step, whole step, half step, whole step, all the way up the piano, and you end up with your dominant diminished scale. And you can use this scale on any chord. For example, when you get to your F7 chord, you can use the F dominant diminished scale. And when you get to your G7 chord, you could use your G dominant diminished scale. Now, if you're feeling a little intimidated, like, oh my goodness, I have to learn 12 different dominant diminished scales, I have good news for you. There are actually only 3 dominant diminished scales. We have C dominant diminished, we have C sharp dominant diminished, and we have D dominant diminished. But guess what? If we play our E flat dominant diminished, it's actually the same as our C dominant diminished. By the way, if you are an intermediate to advanced level pianist and you want to do a deep dive on playing the blues, we've put together the full learning track for your level. This is our blues learning track. And in this learning track, you will learn everything that you need to know about playing the blues. You'll get access to our 10-lesson blues challenge, one of our most popular courses on blues improv. You'll learn how to play blues endings. You'll learn how to improvise with the most important blues scales. You're going to learn how to improvise blues in different keys, how to create an amazing blues solo, how to play lead sheets, use common techniques like 4 on the floor, play popular tunes like Cruella de Vil, play slow blues, medium blues, fast blues, jazzy blues. There's a ton of content for you here, so I'll put a link to this learning track below. All right, we're at level 5, and this is the advanced level, and here's an example for how you might improvise. Now at this level, I recommend that you play a walking bass line in your left hand. So we're gonna skip over the chords and focus specifically on how to walk bass lines. One of the best walking bass line techniques is what's called the chromatic technique. And it's a very simple idea. If I'm going from a C chord to an F chord, I can get to my F chord by either using the lower chromatic notes or the upper chromatic notes. So if I'm going C to F, I could build a bass line like this. Chromatic notes to F. And then if I'm going back to C, I could go up to C here and use chromatic notes. Does that make sense? And then if I'm going down to G, I can use chromatic notes. See that? And then I need to get up to C, so I'm going to use a chromatic note. And then I got to get down to F, so I'll use a chromatic note. Then I recommend that you add ghost notes. And a ghost note is a very short note that you add just before one of your quarter notes in the measure. So for example, on measure 1, there's a little ghost note. See that? There's a ghost note. I put a C in, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? And so I encourage you to do this. Like on the F, you can go, there's a little ghost note on the F. Same thing walking down. Right there on the C, and then another ghost note. All right, when it comes to soloing, you can use any of the techniques that I taught you earlier. However, at level 5, most advanced pianists will be thinking less about scales and they'll be thinking more about approach notes. And approach notes are basically notes that you can add in front of target notes of your chord. For example, if you're on a C7 chord, you can target any one of the chord tones by using lower neighbor approach notes. So on the C7, you can use an F sharp to the G, an E flat to the E, a B to the C, and an A to the B flat. You can also use upper neighbor approach notes. You can use an A flat to the G, an F to the E, a D flat to the C, and a B to the B flat. Another very cool approach technique are what are called enclosures. And with this idea, you can target each one of your chord tones by using one of the notes just above and just below the target note. For example, I can play an upper enclosure on the G, an upper enclosure on the E, on the C, and on the B flat. Likewise, you can do lower enclosures on each of these notes. This concludes the video. If you enjoyed the lesson, please leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.